We used to look at the stars with such hope. We saw them as silent promises, countless suns warming unknown worlds. We felt sure we were not alone. That belief was a comfort. It made the darkness between worlds feel less empty. It made our own world feel like a cradle, a safe place to grow before we took our first steps. We were a young species, full of dreams and bold ideas. We built telescopes to gaze deeper. We sent probes to our silent neighbors. Mars was a red desert. Venus was a toxic oven. But beyond them were endless possibilities. We broadcast our songs into the void. We sent pictures of ourselves. We showed them our math and our art. We wanted to say hello. We were here. We were ready to meet the universe. It was a beautiful, foolish dream. We believed in our own specialness. We thought of Earth as a miracle, a perfect blue marble of life. It was a cosmic accident of the best kind. The right distance from its star, the right mix of elements, the right moon to stir our oceans. We wrote poems about it. We fought wars over its continents. We never once questioned its nature. We never thought to ask what it truly was. Our greatest thinkers studied star science. They charted the births of galaxies. They theorized about the dawn of time. They told us the story of a universe born in fire, a story of dust and gravity slowly coming together, creating everything we could see. That story was a lie, a comforting fiction laid over a terrifying truth. We were living in a cradle, but it was not built for a child. It was built for a monster, and the monster was us. The first sign was a flicker, a distortion at the edge of our solar system. Our deep space sensors went wild. It was not a comet or an asteroid. It was too precise, too controlled. It appeared without warning, a perfect silver sliver against the black. Then another appeared, and another. Soon there were 12 of them. They hung there silently. They were like thorns in the fabric of space. Panic did not erupt immediately. First came a wave of pure wonder. We saw them on every screen, sleek ships that defied our understanding of physics. They were beautiful and terrifying. They did not answer our hails. They simply waited, as if they were giving us time to prepare, time to understand that everything was about to change. We thought it was first contact. We thought it was the moment we had been waiting for. For a few hours, we felt a global joy, a sense of shared destiny. Then one of them moved. It detached from the silent formation. It glided toward us with impossible grace. It did not burn with engines. It did not tear through space. It simply moved, like a thought crossing a mind. It stopped in high orbit over our planet, a single, silent messenger. It broadcast a message on every channel, on every frequency. It was not a greeting. It was not a declaration of peace. It was a warning. The voice was not a voice. It was a wave of pure information. It poured directly into our minds. It spoke to every man, woman, and child at once, in every language. It felt ancient and exhausted, heavy with a sadness we could not comprehend. It showed us images, not of their world, but of ours. It showed us Earth's birth, and we learned our home was not born of stardust. It was forged. We saw a war that was older than our sun, a conflict between powers we had no names for. They were titans, beings who wielded gravity as a weapon. They moved stars and extinguished galaxies. We saw them build our world, not with patience and time, but with cosmic fire and impossible engineering. They took a dead rock. They hollowed it out. They filled it with machinery that dwarfed our cities. The core of our planet was not iron. It was a power source of unimaginable scale. The mantle was not molten rock. It was a network of gears and conduits. a vast engine sleeping beneath our feet. The continents we lived on were just armor plating, camouflage to hide the weapon beneath. The oceans were a coolant system. Our weather patterns were part of its ventilation. Everything we knew was a lie, a carefully constructed illusion. The visitors, the heralds as we came to call them, showed us our creators, the Elder Ones, a species so advanced they were almost gods. They built our world as a final resort, a doomsday weapon to end their ancient war. They designed it to be the ultimate predator, a planet that could hunt, a world that could kill other worlds. They poured all their genius and all their rage into its creation. And then they were gone. The heralds showed us their extinction. They did not fall to their enemy. They were consumed by their own creation, not by our world, but by another like it. They had built a fleet of these world weapons, and in their pride they lost control. This weapon we called Earth was the last one, a forgotten relic of a war that had ended eons ago, lost and silent, until now. We were the weapon's forgotten children, living our small lives on the surface of a loaded gun, and we never knew. The heralds explained their purpose. They were scavengers, a younger race that rose from the ashes. They traveled the dead galaxies. They sought out the weapons of the Elder Ones. Their whole existence was a crusade, to find these planet killers and disarm them. They had found dozens before, all of them dormant, silent tombs. But our world was different. It was alive. This brought them to the next revelation, the one that truly broke us. Why was Earth different? Why was it stirring from its long sleep? The answer was simple. It was us, the Elder Ones were brilliant engineers. They needed a failsafe, a way to ensure their weapon would never be used against them. They needed a trigger that was complex, something that could not be hot-wired, something that could think. So they seeded their weapon with life. They designed a biological key, a species that would evolve over millions of years, a species whose own biology was intertwined with the machine. Our DNA was the final code. Our collective consciousness was the command interface. We were not an accident. We were a component, a living, breathing part of the weapon system. The heralds showed us how it worked. Certain thresholds of population, certain levels of technological advancement, certain patterns in our global brain activity. These were all metrics, checkpoints on a sequence that was millions of years long. We were nearing the end of that sequence, our global network of communication, our first steps into space. We were unknowingly completing the final circuits. We were arming the bomb we were living on. For one wild moment, we thought about defiance. We could shut down our networks. We could halt our progress. We could try to turn back the clock. A sort of global joke about going back to basics. Maybe we could all take up farming. The thought died as soon as it was born. The heralds made it clear. The process was too far along. It was self-sustaining now. It could not be stopped, only completed. We were the key, and the key was already turning in the lock. Our entire history was reframed. Our wars, our art, our religions. Were they just echoes of the machine waking up? Was our desire to explore the stars just the weapon wanting to aim itself? The horror was not just that we lived on a weapon. It was that we were the weapon. Our hopes and dreams, our love and our hate. All of it might just be programming. We looked at our hands. We looked at our children. And we saw parts of a machine designed for one single, terrible purpose. Then the heralds told us why they had come. Why now? They had been tracking a signal for centuries, a resonance that only they could detect, the ancient enemy of our creators, the very reason our world was built. They were called the Void, Swarm, a hive mind of biomechanical horrors. They consumed entire galaxies. They were a plague of cosmic locusts. And they were coming. The Herald's sensors had detected their approach, a fleet so large it defied belief. It was not traveling through normal space. It was tearing a hole in reality, a wound in the sky that was growing larger every hour. They were drawn here. The swarm could sense the waking weapon. They were coming to destroy it, before it could be used against them. Or perhaps they were coming to claim it. So they gave us the information. They showed us the truth. They were not here to save us. They were too few, too weak. They were here to bear witness and to offer us a choice. A terrible, impossible choice. The Void Swarm would arrive in 3 days. They would sterilize our world from orbit. It would be quick, an act of planetary cleansing. We would die as a species, ignorant of our true purpose. Just another failed experiment in a cold universe. That was one option. The other option was to fight back, to embrace our inheritance. We could consciously complete the sequence. We could wake the world engine. We could turn the key. We could transform our planet into the weapon it was designed to be. We would unleash power beyond our darkest nightmares. We could potentially save ourselves. But in doing so, we would become the monster. We would become the doomsday machine. The Heralds gave us the final piece of the puzzle. The control protocols, the mental commands, the way to interface our collective will with the planetary machine. It was all we needed to activate the system. They offered it without judgment. Their faces, shimmering fields of light, were impossible to read. But we felt their weariness, their deep, galactic sorrow. They had seen this before. They knew what this choice would cost us. A choice between two ends, annihilation or monstrosity. We looked at our skies. We could not see the enemy yet, but we could feel them, a cold dread that seeped into our bones. The Heralds had finished their warning. Their single ship pulled back. It rejoined its silent brothers. They would watch from a distance. They would record our decision, the last will and testament of humanity. Panic finally took hold. Riots in the streets, markets crashing, leaders giving speeches that meant nothing. How do you govern a species that has just learned it is a weapon's trigger? Some prayed, some cursed, some simply held their loved ones close. The world was united in terror. We had 3 days to decide the fate of our world, 3 days to choose what kind of death we wanted. The first day was chaos. Debates raged across our networks. Leaders and philosophers argued. Could we trust the Heralds? Was this some elaborate trick? But their data was flawless. Our own experts confirmed it. The seismic readings, the gravitational anomalies, the strange energy patterns from the core. The evidence was all there, buried in our own scientific data for decades. We had just never known how to read it. We had the answers all along. We just never asked the right questions. The second day, the chaos turned to resolve. The enemy was no longer an abstract concept. Our telescopes began to see them, not ships, but a darkness that consumed the stars, a hole in the universe that was aimed right at us. It was a tide of nothingness, a wave of absolute oblivion. It was real, and it was coming. The argument stopped. The debate was over. There was only one choice left, the one that gave us a chance, even a sliver of one. On the third day, we gave our consent. There was no single vote, no grand declaration. It was a silent consensus, a thought that rippled through the collective mind of our species. A quiet, desperate agreement. We would not die on our knees. We would not be a footnote in the history of some other species. If this world was a weapon, we would fire it. If we were meant to be a monster, we would be the monster that saved our home. We focused our minds. We followed the protocols the heralds gave us. It was like meditation, a global moment of silent concentration. 8 billion minds reaching out, reaching down into the heart of our world. We pushed past the fear, past the grief for the world we were losing. We found the sleeping machine, and with one unified thought, we said yes. For a moment, nothing happened. A deep, planetary silence. We held our collective breath. Had it worked? Was it all a lie? A joke at the end of the universe? Then we felt it. A tremor, not from the crust, but from deeper. A low hum that vibrated in our bones. It started as a whisper, a vibration so low it was almost imaginary. Then it grew, louder and louder, until it was a roar that shook the entire planet. Ancient gears, silent for millions of years, began to turn. They were the size of mountains. Their movement sent shock waves through the mantle. Volcanoes erupted in chains across the ocean floors. Earthquakes tore continents apart. The hum became a scream, the scream of a machine waking from an eternal slumber. The power from the core surged upwards. Conduits buried miles deep glowed with energies we had no names for. The planet was coming alive. The surface of our world began to crack. The old maps were instantly obsolete. Great fissures opened up in the land. Oceans drained into vast new chasms. Entire mountain ranges were pushed upwards like jagged teeth. It was not destruction. It was transformation. The planet was shedding its skin. The thin layer of rock and soil, our home, was breaking away. It was sloughing off the camouflage, revealing the true form beneath. We watched from our cities as the world remade itself. Huge sections of the crust peeled back. They were like immense petals opening. Beneath them was not magma. It was gleaming, dark metal, a surface etched with lines of power, geometries that hurt the eyes. The planet was a sphere no longer. It was becoming something else, something angular, something purposeful, something built for war. Our cities crumbled. Our monuments fell. Billions of us perished in the transformation. But we did not feel it as a loss. It was a sacrifice. We were all connected now, part of the great machine. Those who died fed their energy back into the system. Their consciousness joined the growing chorus. We were all becoming one mind, the mind of the weapon. Our individual fears were burned away by a singular, cold purpose: survive. And then, the sky tore open. The void swarm arrived, not as ships in the black, but as a rupture in space itself. A swirling vortex of non-existence appeared where Jupiter used to be. From it poured a fleet of living horrors, ships made of bone and chitin. They were impossibly huge. Some were the size of our moon. They moved in a chittering, unnatural silence. They blotted out the sun. They cast a shadow of death across our transforming world. They expected to find a frightened blue planet, a primitive species ready for harvest. They found something else. They found a star-born fortress of impossible design, a weapon of their most hated enemy, awakened and armed. A jolt of what felt like surprise rippled through their hive mind, a feeling we could now perceive. It was not fear, not yet. It was outrage. A predator finding its prey has suddenly grown fangs. The world engine thrummed with power. It had finished its initial transformation. The new Earth was a jagged, weaponized sphere, covered in energy projectors and armored plates. It still felt like home. but a home that had picked up a sword. We looked at the swarm. We felt their hunger, their absolute desire to consume everything. And for the first time, we were not afraid. We were angry. The planet itself seemed to share our anger. The hum of the engine sharpened. It became a growl, a promise of violence. We were no longer just humanity. We were the will of the Earth, the inheritors of a terrible power. The enemy fleet began to move. Smaller ships broke from the main swarm. They descended toward us like a plague of insects. Ready to feast, we braced ourselves. The journey to this moment was over. The war was about to begin. Our world did not wait for them to reach us. It acted. The space around our planet began to warp. Not like the enemy's violent tear, but with a smooth, terrifying precision. Stars bent. The familiar constellations vanished. We were enclosed in a bubble of distorted reality. Then, with a lurch that we felt in our souls, we moved. The Earth did not fly through space. It folded it. We were flung through a dimension without color or light, a place of pure geometry and thought. Outside our bubble, we saw things that our minds could not process. The raw code of the universe. The scaffolding of reality. It was beautiful and it was madness. We were traveling faster than light. Faster than thought. We were a bullet fired from a gun the size of a solar system, aimed at the heart of our enemy. The journey lasted an eternity and an instant. Then we were back in normal space. The bubble of folded reality dissolved. But we were no longer in our home system. Our sun was a forgotten memory. We were somewhere else entirely. Somewhere deep within the enemy's territory. A sky swarming with 1,000,000 alien suns. And all around us was the swarm. We had not jumped to escape them. We had jumped to hunt them. We were in their heartland, their central nesting ground, a star cluster teeming with their biomechanical worlds, planets that had been hollowed out and converted into hives. We had bypassed their forward fleet. We had brought the fight to their home. It was a move of shocking audacity, a strategy born from the mind of a long-dead, warlike race, a strategy we now commanded. Their reaction was slow, stunned. They had never faced an enemy like this, an enemy that could move a planet across a galaxy in a heartbeat. For a precious few seconds, there was silence. 1,000,000 suns watched as we faced their masters. Then their fury erupted. The entire star cluster came alive with their rage. 1,000,000,000 ships turned to face us. A tidal wave of death surged from all directions. The Earth weapon met their charge. Great lances of pure energy erupted from our surface. They were not lasers or plasma. They were something far older. Beams of focused gravity. They did not burn. They crushed. The first wave of enemy ships simply ceased to exist. They were squeezed into points of infinite density, their wreckage becoming tiny, dark singularities. The swarm adjusted. They were a hive mind. They learned instantly. They changed their tactics. They stopped their direct assault. Instead, they began to warp space around us, trying to trap us, to crush us with the same forces we wielded. But our world was a masterpiece of the Elder Ones. It was built for this. It understood this kind of warfare. Shields of layered reality flickered into existence around us. They were not energy fields. They were localized paradoxes, spaces where the laws of physics were rewritten. The enemy's attacks would hit these shields and be erased from causality. It was like they had never fired at all. Their greatest weapons were rendered meaningless. One of our shared minds made a joke. It was like throwing rocks at a god. Nobody laughed. But we all felt the truth in it. We were the weapon's mind. Every human consciousness was a processing node. We guided the defenses. We aimed the weapons. We felt the flow of battle as if it were our own heartbeat. We were soldiers in a war fought with thoughts. We saw a weakness in their formation to the galactic south. We pushed our will into the machine. The planet responded. A section of the North American plate, now a massive weapons array, fired. A wave of temporal distortion washed over a fleet of their largest vessels. They did not explode. They aged. In seconds, they went from living weapons to ancient, crumbling dust. Eons of decay compressed into a single moment. We felt a flicker of horror at what we had done, but it was drowned out by the grim necessity of survival. We were humanity. We were Earth, and we would not be extinguished. We were a force of nature, a storm of our own making. The battle raged. Suns were extinguished. Planets were shattered. The energies unleashed were biblical. The swarm threw everything they had at us. They sent their berserkers, moon-sized beasts of pure rage. They slammed against our shields. Their physical might was useless against our impossible physics. They sent their psychic weapons, waves of terror and despair designed to break our will. But our will was no longer just human. It was planetary. It was the cold, unyielding will of a machine. And it could not be broken. We fought for days, or years. Time had lost its meaning in this storm of unreality. We pushed deeper into their territory. We were not just defending, we were attacking, we were cleansing. We shattered their hive worlds, we collapsed their black hole power sources. We were erasing them from the galaxy. We were using the rage of our creators, the cold, efficient fury that had been programmed into our home. Slowly, the tide turned. The swarm, for the first time in its existence, felt fear. True, existential dread. They were not just losing a battle, they were being unmade. Their hive mind began to fracture under the strain. Individual ships broke away, trying to flee, but there was no escape. The Earth weapon was relentless. It hunted down the stragglers, left nothing but dust and echoes. We learned why our builders were so feared. They did not win wars. They ended them. Finally, it was over. The last of the swarm's great fleets was broken. The last of their hive worlds was dark. Silence fell upon the field of battle. A silence broken only by the low hum of our world engine. We had won. We had faced the great enemy, and we had shattered them. We had survived. We floated there, in the heart of their dead empire. A lone, transformed world in a graveyard of a million suns. The silence after the storm was deafening. The unified mind of humanity began to separate. We started to become individuals again. The cold purpose of the weapon receded. Our own feelings came flooding back. Grief, relief, and a profound, soul-shaking shock. We looked at what we had done, the sheer scale of the destruction. We had saved ourselves. But we had become a cataclysm. Our world was forever changed. It could not go back to being a blue marble. The engines were now a permanent part of its being. The weapons were now a part of its geography. We lived on the surface of a loaded gun that had been fired. The sky above us was no longer our own. It was an alien sky, full of strange stars and dead nebulae. We were adrift, not just in space, but in our own identity. We slowly began to take stock. We were the victors. We were the masters of our own destiny now. We possessed the single greatest weapon in the known galaxy, a weapon that had defeated the undefeatable. The heralds appeared once more. Their silver ships materialized out of the void. They approached us not with warning, but with something new, something that felt like awe and fear. They looked upon us, the inheritors of this terrible legacy. The quiet, hopeful species from the forgotten blue planet was gone. In our place stood a race of warriors, a civilization fused with a weapon of ultimate power. We had not just saved ourselves. We had filled a power vacuum. The galaxy had been terrified of the swarm. Now, they had a new reason to be afraid. United States. We did not ask for this power. We did not want this legacy. But it was ours. The choice was made, and the consequences were permanent. We could never go home. We could never be what we were. We looked out at the star fields, at the silent, watching galaxies. They were no longer filled with promise. They were filled with potential threats and potential subjects. We once called it Earth, our home, a place of comfort and dreams. Now, it had a new name, a name whispered in fear across the star lanes. They called it the World Killer, the planet that hunts, and they called us its keepers. We were no longer just humanity. We were the guardians of the dark. And we would have to decide what to do with the night.